Somewhere in America, someone woke up, looked at absolute garbage, and thought, yep, this deserves a price tag. And trust me, what they sold next only gets dumber. 1. A person once listed a lightly used family-sized swimming pool online, which sounded reasonable until potential buyers discovered the pool was not actually a pool but a massive hole-shaped concept of a pool. Described in a way only a poet with heat stroke could manage. The seller clarified that the plastic shell had blown away in a storm, leaving only the metal ring, a few stakes, and what they referred to as the spirit of summer fun. The price naturally matched that of a functioning pool, because the seller insisted they were offering the framework for imagination. Someone actually bought it, presumably because they were either trying to fill the void in their yard or the one in their soul. And the punchline is that the seller proudly updated the listing afterward with "sold fast. Demand is wild this season," which says less about seasonal demand and more about the terrifying elasticity of American optimism. 2. A guy put up a listing for a vintage refrigerator that was neither vintage nor a refrigerator, but more of a metal cube-shaped regret with a door. The appliance hadn't been functional since the Bush administration, and the seller emphasized this proudly as if mechanical failure were a feature, describing it as a perfect storage unit for items that don't require temperature or safety. The photos revealed a level of interior rust that suggested the fridge had been used as a part-time aquarium during biblical flooding. Nevertheless, someone bought it, allegedly because they needed something heavy to keep raccoons out of the shed, which is the kind of problem-solving that keeps emergency rooms in business. The seller later wrote back to the buyer offering professional cleaning for a small fee, proving that some people are committed not just to selling garbage, but to upcharging for it. 3. A woman attempted to sell a half-burned wedding dress described as dramatically altered by life events, which is a poetic way of saying it survived a bonfire with morale but not fabric intact. She insisted the charred edges were aesthetic distressing, like she thought couture and controlled demolition were interchangeable concepts. The listing photos showed a dress that looked like it had been through both emotional and literal combustion, yet she priced it as if it had walked a red carpet instead of running from it. Surprisingly, someone bought it, not to wear, but to use as a Halloween prop, which feels like the first time in retail history a purchase was simultaneously tragic, practical, and a cry for help. The final kicker was the seller's note that she hoped it finds a happier chapter, suggesting she believed in reincarnation for polyester. 4. Someone tried to sell a fully functional treadmill. That was missing its belt, motor, digital display, and realism. The listing described it as a minimalist cardio experience, which is the kind of spin even Instagram fitness influencers wouldn't attempt. The remaining frame looked like an artifact from an archaeological dig where ancient humans abandoned exercise halfway through development. The seller claimed the treadmill still offered incredible resistance training, which was technically true since anyone using it would essentially be dragging themselves across bare machinery like a fitness-themed escape room. Remarkably, the buyer was a gym owner who wanted it as a motivational art piece, proving that capitalism can make even failure aspirational. The whole thing demonstrates that if you label junk as a lifestyle, someone, somewhere, will decide it speaks to their journey. 5. A man listed a rare collector's spoon that was just an ordinary metal spoon engraved with the phrase "do not steal," raising immediate questions about both the spoon's past and its sense of self-worth. He claimed his grandmother had given it to him on her deathbed, a story so dramatic it deserved its own limited series. Yet he simultaneously admitted he had no idea where it originally came from, which is the kind of plot twist that ruins season finales. The spoon was priced at $105 because he said it had survived multiple moves and emotional storms, which makes it less of a utensil and more of a coping mechanism. Someone bought it, not because it was valuable, but because they wanted a conversation starter for their kitchen drawer, which is a new low in American social dynamics. The irony, of course, is that a spoon allegedly marked to prevent theft was purchased voluntarily, meaning it has finally achieved the moral arc it was born to complete. 6. A person once tried selling a jar of pre-owned but emotionally pure marbles, which is a category of product no human should ever feel compelled to define. The listing claimed the marbles had belonged to a child genius who outsmarted the neighborhood and eventually moved on to more advanced spheres of thought. which is a suspiciously poetic explanation for a kid losing interest in toys. The marbles were stored in a jar that had clearly survived a fall from at least one countertop, and possibly a moving vehicle. Yet the seller insisted each marble carried the memories of strategic triumphs, as if they were relics from a war documentary. Someone bought the jar for $30, presumably to replace their own missing marbles, metaphorically or otherwise. The seller ended by offering the buyer a signed certificate of authenticity, which implies there is a thriving underground economy in certified children's glass orb achievements. And frankly, that seems accurate for the country that invented limited edition McDonald's sauces. 7. Someone offered a fully operational set of walkie-talkies, even though only one of them worked, and the other was best described as a brick with ambitions. The seller emphasized their military aesthetic, which is internet code for was once dropped downstairs and never recovered spiritually. Their range was listed as several houses or one very cooperative neighborhood, which is a diplomatic way of saying they cut out whenever a bird flew by. Nevertheless, someone bought them, claiming they wanted to communicate with their kids without giving them phones, which suggests they believed in the power of nostalgia more than functional technology. The true highlight was the seller's assurance that the broken walkie-talkie still sparks interesting conversations, a statement that is both technically untrue and ironically accurate, considering it sparked this entire discussion about online stupidity. 8. A seller once posted an ad for organic, ethically sourced air, captured in mason jars and available for $10 each, with premium options labeled Monday Breeze and Thursday Morning Chill, as if weekdays have scent profiles. The seller claimed the air was harvested from a serene backyard untouched by modern stress, ignoring the power lines visible in every photo. The listing explained the air was perfect for deep inhalation, spiritual resets, or gifting to coworkers who need clarity, which is the kind of sentence that pairs best with non-refundable yoga deposits. Someone bought 3 jars, which should concern us all. When asked why the jars varied in size, the seller explained that air expands emotionally, which is not a scientific concept, but is absolutely a marketing strategy that will flourish in a society where people already buy moonwater. The buyer left a 5-star review saying the air tasted hopeful, which is a sign we're approaching the point in civilization where satire must surrender. 9. A person attempted to sell a DIY swimming experience, which turned out to be a kiddie pool filled with sand, marketed as a stationary beach solution for people who crave the ocean without the water. The seller claimed sand was more efficient than liquid, a statement that boldly reframes both physics and common sense. The photos showed a pool that looked like it had survived an existential crisis in someone's backyard, complete with a faded plastic shell and sand levels inconsistent with measurable effort. The listing implied this was a luxury experience by referring to the setup as an immersive tactile landscape, which is code for "we emptied a bag of sand from Home Depot and hoped for the best." Someone bought it for their toddler, proving that if you label anything sensory play, parents will consider it educational. The seller noted proudly that the buyer arranged pickup the same day, which suggests either enthusiasm or desperation, and possibly both. 10. Someone tried to unload a massive, hand-painted portrait of a man who wasn't anyone's relative, celebrity, or historical figure, just a vaguely smiling stranger whose identity was as ambiguous as his facial symmetry. The listing titled him Gregory, Keeper of the Hallway, which is not a job, but more of a supernatural implication. The seller admitted they had inherited the painting from a previous tenant and had grown tired of Gregory's increasingly judgmental stare, which is a fair complaint since the portrait proportions made it appear as though Gregory's eyes followed people with supernatural disappointment. Someone actually bought it, saying they needed a guardian presence for their Airbnb, which is a sentence that belongs in a horror movie contract. The truly absurd part is that the seller offered to bless the painting for positive vibes, as if Gregory were waiting for clerical promotion. The painting sold within 20 minutes, indicating an alarming market for decorative hauntings. 11. A man listed a collection of historic screws taken from old furniture he no longer owned, describing them as architectural survivors with the courage to endure new projects. Each screw was photographed individually like a contestant in the saddest beauty pageant imaginable. The seller wrote lengthy biographies for each one, including a screw named Martin who had allegedly supported a dresser longer than most marriages last. which suggests the listing doubled as a creative writing exercise. Someone bought the entire set for crafting purposes, though the seller warned them to treat the screws with respect because they had retired from heavy labor, as though metal hardware had a union. The best part was the disclaimer that some screws may hold trauma, which is not only nonsensical, but simultaneously the most accurate description of secondhand DIY materials available online. 12. A seller posted a used blender described as almost functional, which is a phrase that applies more naturally to New Year's resolutions than kitchen appliances. The listing explained that the blender only worked on one speed, specifically chaotic, and users should hold the lid down with faith and upper body strength. It had a crack along the side. The seller called a vent, demonstrating the entrepreneurial optimism that keeps dangerous objects circulating. Someone bought it because they needed something cheap for smoothies, which is a sentence that should have been accompanied by a living will. The seller assured buyers that the irregular blade motion created unique textures, which is one way to say this will redefine your relationship with liquids. The whole thing was presented like a rustic artisanal tool rather than a small domestic weapon waiting to happen. 13. A person tried selling a haunted-looking ceramic clown head they claimed was emotionally misunderstood, an assessment generous enough to qualify as charity. Work. The clown's expression hovered somewhere between confused joy and mild vengeance, and the listing insisted it lightens any room, sometimes literally, which is not a comforting phrase. The seller admitted they didn't know where it came from, only that it turns up in different places, which should have triggered a priest rather than a marketplace transaction. Someone bought it for a Halloween display and later asked if the seller could confirm its energy level, proving that ambiguity can be a business model. The seller responded that the clown had strong whimsical tendencies, which is exactly the kind of phrase that makes homeowners' insurance adjusters ask follow-up questions. 14. Someone attempted to sell a custom ergonomic chair that was clearly a folding lawn chair duct taped to a broken office swivel base. The listing emphasized its hybrid engineering and versatile posture modes, which is marketing slang for it spins, and you probably shouldn't sit on it. The seat cushion was compressed to the thickness of a pancake that had lost custody of its fluff. Yet the seller described it as memory foam, perhaps meaning it remembered better days. Shockingly, a remote work employee bought it because their company wouldn't reimburse legitimate furniture. The seller claimed it reduces workplace stress, which is accurate only in the sense that sitting on it likely shortens a person's remaining workload permanently. 15. A guy listed a rare antique bottle that was obviously a 1990s Snapple bottle with the label peeled off. He described the bottle as timeless glass craftsmanship, ignoring the fact that the bottom still had the factory code. He insisted it was perfect for decorators, historians, or beverage enthusiasts seeking legacy containers, which is a phrase that single-handedly proves marketing is an act of fiction. Someone bought it for $10, possibly because they misread the listing or were heavily invested in nostalgia. The seller thanked the buyer and mentioned he had several more artifacts available, which means he likely had recycling piled up behind the camera. The entire transaction was the retail equivalent of performance art. 16. A person sold an unopened mystery box found in their garage, advertised as a time capsule of potential excitement, which is a confident phrase for something they admitted they were afraid to open themselves. The box was taped shut with layers that suggested it had been through multiple attempts at escape, and the seller warned that it might contain craft materials or something alive, which is the kind of disclaimer that should come with a hotline. Nevertheless, someone bought it because they loved adventure, which is a polite way of saying they lacked survival instincts. The best part was the seller's assurance that whatever is inside has value to someone, which is both universally true and utterly meaningless, a perfect summary of online commerce. 17. A seller posted a fully functional decorative lamp, a contradiction that became more obvious as the description continued. The lamp's cord was missing, the bulb socket dangled like a loose tooth, and the shade looked as though a raccoon had attempted modern art on it. Still, the seller claimed the lamp illuminates spaces spiritually, which is convenient since it couldn't illuminate them physically. They suggested using it as an energy statement piece, a phrase that belongs in a catalog for people who buy furniture based on horoscope compatibility. Someone bought it because it matched a vibe, confirming that vibes are now a legitimate currency. The seller ended the listing with "may require minor rewiring," which is an elegant understatement for You will need tools, training, and possibly a fire extinguisher. 18. A man posted a listing for a custom aquarium that turned out to be a standard plastic storage bin filled with water, 2 goldfish, and a single plastic plant taped to the side like a hostage note. He claimed the bin's open concept design gave fish emotional freedom, which is a poetic way of saying he forgot to buy a lid. The water level in the photo was suspiciously low, suggesting the fish had unionized for better conditions. The seller bragged that the setup was easy to clean, which was technically true since all you had to do was pour the entire ecosystem down the drain. Nevertheless, a buyer scooped it up because they liked the DIY vibe, proving that people will overlook anything if you market it as minimalist. The seller even added that the fish enjoy the sunlight, ignoring that sunlight plus plastic bin equals soup. But who am I to argue with the Michelangelo of aquatic neglect? 19. A woman attempted to sell a half bag of potting soil described as partially used but spiritually complete, as if soil needed emotional closure before being transferred. She explained she no longer had a garden because the neighborhood raccoon made other plans, which is the most polite way to say she lost a turf war to a creature half the size of a pillow. The bag had a rip down the side that she referred to as a vent, which is a suspiciously common euphemism in the world of selling damaged goods. Someone bought it because they needed just a little dirt, which is such a beautifully American reason to spend money that it belongs in a museum. The seller even clarified that the soil was highly compatible with plants, a statement so profoundly obvious it loops back around to questionable. It's impressive how a product literally made of ground can still feel overpriced. 20. A person listed a fully functional television replica, which was actually a hollowed-out flat-screen shell with no electronics inside, described as a perfect display for people who want the look of a TV without the lifestyle commitment. They tried spinning the absence of functionality as a mindful approach to media consumption, like Buddhist minimalism was hiding inside a Best Buy dumpster. The photos showed a frame that had clearly been removed with violence, and the seller insisted this made it lighter and more flexible for modern decor needs, as though weight, not electricity, was the primary feature of televisions. Someone bought it because they wanted a prop for a stage play, a decision that implies the art community is either incredibly resourceful or completely out of funding. The listing ended with a warning not to attempt installation of real components, which is the closest this object ever came to having a personality. 21. A guy tried to sell a toaster that had only one working slot and a dial stuck permanently on slightly scorched, presenting it as a precision-oriented breakfast tool that celebrated flavor unpredictability. The toaster had burn marks suggesting it had fought at least one small kitchen war and survived only through spite. The seller assured potential buyers that the defective slot could still hold bread for display, finally giving carbs the museum treatment they've always deserved. Someone bought it for their college dorm, which feels like a prophecy of future fire alarms. The seller insisted it would bring excitement to your mornings, which is accurate if your definition of excitement includes monitoring small appliances like their volatile chemistry experiments. The whole thing was marketed with such confidence, you would think it was artisanal, handmade toast chaos rather than a retirement-ready toaster with abandonment issues. 22. A woman listed a vintage-looking mirror described as mysteriously flattering, which sounded charming until she explained that it had a naturally soft focus, caused by decades of grime fused to the glass. She claimed the haze added timeless beauty, which is true if you believe every mirror should airbrush you like a budget portrait studio. The frame was cracked at the top, and the seller insisted it was not a flaw but a dramatic accent, proving that with enough optimism anything can become a feature. Someone bought it specifically because it made them look better than reality, which is both honest and deeply concerning. The seller assured the buyer the mirror had never once shown a harsh truth, an endorsement that doubles as a psychological red flag. The entire transaction demonstrated that when self-esteem meets commerce, realism is the first casualty. 23. Someone attempted to sell a collection of Artisan ice cubes, which were just cloudy cubes frozen in mismatched trays, but the seller insisted the imperfections added a rustic handmade charm. They were stored in a Ziploc bag with a level of frostbite that suggested these cubes had witnessed winter from the inside. The listing proudly stated the cubes had excellent hardness, as though buyers everywhere had been seeking ice with structural integrity. Someone purchased them for a photo shoot, which raises alarming questions about the creative direction. The seller even offered subscription services for weekly batches, implying a belief that the market for curated frozen water was not only real, but booming. It's rare to see entrepreneurship and delusion braided so tightly together that they become indistinguishable. But here we are, selling the most abundant molecule on Earth at boutique prices. 24. A man tried selling a single shoe, not a pair, just one, describing it as ideal for collectors, artists, or extremely optimistic amputees. The shoe was scuffed to the point that it looked like it had tried to escape its wearer mid-stride. He claimed it had character, a phrase sellers love because it means nothing but feels deep. Someone actually bought it to use in a sculpture, proving that the art world will rescue even the loneliest of footwear from a tragic landfill destiny. The seller included measurements for the shoe, in case a matching partner ever turns up, which makes it sound like he hoped for a Cinderella subplot. The entire listing radiated the energy of a man who believed that every product, no matter how incomplete, deserved a second chance. 25. A person listed a high-performance umbrella that could not open fully and leaned dramatically to one side, giving it the appearance of a defeated palm tree. They claimed its asymmetry helps deflect wind creatively, a phrase that is legally distinct from does not work. The canopy fabric had a tier described as ventilation, which is quite possibly the most committed euphemism in online retail. Shockingly, someone bought it because they needed a prop for a music video, which is the ideal environment for objects that have given up on practical life. The seller ended the listing with, "Works great in light rain," a statement that must be taken on faith since any raindrop larger than a teardrop would pass directly through the ventilation. It's truly inspiring how confidently people sell structural failure. 26. Someone posted a set of decorative forks, which were actually just regular metal forks that had been accidentally bent during a garbage disposal incident. The seller insisted the new angles made them more ergonomic, like they had reinvented cutlery fatigue. One fork had twisted into a shape resembling abstract art, and the seller argued it could spark conversations at dinner parties, assuming your guests enjoy confusion. Someone bought them for a craft project, which is the best-case scenario for utensils that look like they lost a fight with a blender. The seller warned against using them for actual eating, which is generous considering these forks were clearly retired from service. The listing was a masterclass in pretending chaos is intentional. 27. A guy attempted to sell a professionally modified bicycle, although the only modification seemed to be that the front wheel was missing entirely. The listing described it as a balance training experience, which is correct if you believe training should include a mild risk of dental reconstruction. He claimed it was lighter than a standard bike, which is technically true since removing functional components tends to reduce weight. Someone bought it because they wanted a statement piece, which is exactly what this was, a statement that read, "I no longer understand what a bicycle is." The seller emphasized the bike's ability to encourage core strength, which it certainly would, mostly because using it would activate every survival muscle in the body. The whole situation felt like a physics prank marketed as lifestyle equipment. 28. A woman sold a pet enrichment habitat, which was simply a shoebox with 3 holes punched in the lid and a sticker reading "Fun Zone." She claimed the minimalist design stimulates natural curiosity, which is a generous interpretation of cardboard. The box had visible water damage explained as textured grip zones, and the seller assured buyers the box had supported several successful enrichment sessions, a statement that reveals nothing while sounding vaguely illegal. Someone bought it for a guinea pig, proving that pet owners will justify anything as long as the marketing includes the word enrichment. The seller added that the box was fully biodegradable, a fact that is less of a feature and more of a countdown. Somehow this became a transaction instead of a recycling moment. 29. A person listed a home entertainment system that consisted of a DVD player missing the tray, several unmarked cables, and a remote belonging to an entirely different brand of appliance. The seller described the system as modular, which in this context means incomplete. The photos showed the DVD player sitting on a carpet that had clearly seen things, and the seller argued that the setup was best for creative users who enjoy problem solving, which is an elegant way of saying good luck getting this to work. Someone bought it because they wanted spare parts, which is probably the first time spare parts shopped for spare parts. The seller concluded that the system may need minor adjustments, a phrase that should be accompanied by 3 electricians and a priest. 30. A man tried selling an authentic historical fire extinguisher, which turned out to be a rusted metal canister from the 1970s that had lost the will to extinguish anything long ago. He claimed it was a piece of safety history. As if that excused the fact that it now posed more risk than fire, he emphasized that it was ideal for decorative use, which is marketplace shorthand for "you will die if you trust this." Someone bought it to display in a retro-themed bar, which is fitting since bars are already filled with items that once prevented bad decisions but no longer do. The seller added that the extinguisher might still spray something, which is less a reassurance and more a lawsuit warming up in the distance. 31. A woman listed a batch of Artisan breadcrumbs, which were clearly the remains of a failed baking endeavor. She marketed them as Culinary fragments from a rustic loaf, which is code for "this bread did not survive the oven." The crumbs were stored in a mason jar because nothing says authenticity like glass containment. Someone bought them for a recipe because they liked the story, proving that food culture has drifted so far into narrative obsession that even failure can be monetized. The seller explained that the crumbs had a bold texture, which is something crumbs should not have. The whole listing felt like performance art disguised as pantry goods. 32. A seller attempted to move a luxury pet carrier that was clearly a repurposed gym bag with holes cut into the sides and a mesh panel taped on. The seller insisted it was lightweight and travel-friendly, which it absolutely was unless your pet enjoyed oxygen. Someone bought it for transporting a small reptile, proving that even the animal kingdom is occasionally subjected to budget decisions. The zipper was broken, and the seller described it as nonlinear access, a phrase so confidently wrong it deserves applause. The listing concluded with "pet may require supervision," as though supervision alone could correct the structural optimism of this cloth coffin. 33. Someone posted a revolutionary lampshade alternative, which was simply a paper grocery bag placed upside down on a lamp. They argued the bag diffused light in a warm, earthy spectrum, which is one way to describe the fire hazard aisle at any hardware store. The bag had printed ads on the side, giving the light a retail glow no normal lamp should ever emit. Someone purchased the idea, not the bag, because the seller proudly stated each shade is custom-made, meaning they had unlimited access to grocery stores. They framed this as eco-friendly, which is true if your definition of eco-friendly includes replacing products with garbage. The listing ended by warning users not to leave the lamp unattended, which is a polite understatement for "this will ignite faster than your hopes in a group project." 34. A man listed a partially operational drone, which was just the top half of a drone. The bottom propellers were missing, and the battery compartment was held together with tape that had given up. He described it as aerial-adjacent technology, which is impressively creative for something incapable of aerial anything. In the photos, the drone was sitting on a grill, suggesting it had already attempted flight and met heat. Someone bought it because they wanted a challenge, which is an admirable if slightly reckless personality trait. The seller claimed it could still glide if thrown correctly, which means the drone had been downgraded to a fancy rock. It's astounding how confidently people rebrand failure as innovation. 35. A seller posted a collectible mystery sandwich they claimed had been preserved through unknown scientific means, which turned out to be a fast food burger left in a glove box for so long it had achieved a geological texture. They insisted it hadn't molded because it was extraordinary, a statement that should qualify as legally suspicious. The photos showed a bun so rigid it could double as a throwing disc, yet the seller argued it was an artifact of American culinary history. Incredibly, someone bought it because they wanted to test it for immortality, which is a hobby no one should admit publicly. The seller added that the sandwich had emotional energy, confirming once and for all that the line between e-commerce and performance art is thinner than the cheese slice still clinging to the patty like a fossilized memory. 36. A man listed a fully functional garden fountain, which in reality was just a hose duct taped to a ceramic frog statue, spewing water at a pressure usually reserved for riot control. He claimed the frog projected serenity, which is a bold statement for a stone amphibian aggressively blasting water like it's fighting for its life. The spray radius was large enough to water half the neighborhood or dissolve the other half, depending on wind direction. Someone bought it because they wanted movement in their yard, and nothing moves quite like a hyper-pressurized jet stream erupting from a frog's mouth like it just discovered caffeine. The seller even warned buyers not to overuse the fountain, suggesting the frog had already seen too much. Truly an emotional roller coaster for a lawn ornament. 37. A woman tried selling a meditative doorstop, which was simply a rock painted with the word breathe in shaky cursive. She insisted the rock had been infused with intentional grounding energy, though her backyard in the photos did not appear to be a metaphysical hotspot. In her description, she claimed the stone helps stabilize emotional doorways, which is exactly the kind of sentence people write after flipping through a yoga magazine too quickly. Someone bought it because they felt drawn to the rock, proving that marketing is often just hypnosis delivered through adjectives. The seller clarified that no actual meditation instruction was included, only the silent wisdom of the earth, which is a poetic way to say it's a rock. Please buy it. 38. A guy posted a used flashlight described as philosophically interesting because it turned on only when it felt like it. Sometimes it flickered, sometimes it glowed faintly like a dying idea, and sometimes it refused to acknowledge the concept of illumination entirely. The seller said this unpredictability adds character, as though people everywhere are dying for a flashlight with commitment issues. Someone bought it for a haunted house project, proving that at least one person recognized the flashlight's true identity as emotional lighting. The seller ended the listing with "requires a patient owner," which is something normally reserved for pets, not semi-functional tubes of aluminum. Honestly, the flashlight probably needed therapy more than batteries. 39. A person tried selling a retro smart device, which was just an old pager with the battery corroded into modern sculpture. They claimed it represented the early days of personal connectivity, a phrase that almost distracts from the fact that the device no longer displayed anything except a faint smell of 1998. Someone bought it because they wanted a conversation piece, which is a polite way of saying they no longer trusted guests to make conversation on their own. The seller assured the buyer the pager was ready for display, which is convenient because that is the only activity it was capable of. It's remarkable how nostalgia can turn obsolete technology into decor, as long as you ignore the possibility of tetanus. 40. A woman listed a limited edition artistic curtain, which was actually a bedsheet clamped to a rod using binder clips. She called the clips industrial accents and described the sheet's wrinkles as organic texturing, demonstrating a deep faith in the power of creative phrasing. Someone bought it for a studio apartment because it looked quirky, and quirky is simply the word people use when they don't want to admit something is structurally questionable. The seller insisted it filters light emotionally, a phrase that should legally require footnotes. The entire listing operated on the premise that interior design is just confidence with fabric. 41. A man listed a multi-species habitat, which turned out to be a cardboard box with 2 air holes and a handwritten label. Lizard? Maybe. He explained the box had been left on his porch and seemed alive with mystery, which is not a selling point so much as a reason to call animal control. He admitted he didn't open it because the box deserved privacy, and yet was perfectly willing to sell it to someone else. Incredibly, someone bought it because they felt brave that day, which suggests our society now handles danger the same way we handle impulse purchases. The seller ended by reminding the buyer that life is unpredictable, which is exactly the kind of corporate disclaimer we need for online mystery fauna. 42. A seller attempted to move a futuristic mobility device, which was simply a skateboard missing 2 wheels, described as a simplified vehicle for those craving minimalism in motion. The remaining wheels were positioned in a way that suggested nothing good could happen at speeds above 0. They claimed the board encourages mindfulness, probably because riding it requires you to contemplate every decision you've ever made. Someone bought it because they wanted a challenge for the kids, a phrase that will definitely appear later in a medical billing statement. The seller insisted it was best used in short bursts, a warning that also describes the average lifespan of someone attempting to ride a 2-wheeled skateboard. 43. A person posted a reclaimed lamp collection, which was actually a box of mismatched light bulbs gathered during what looked like a long journey through junk drawers. They advertised the bulbs as an exploration of illumination through time, despite several being cracked, burned out, or shaped like they melted during an existential crisis. Someone bought the box for a photography project, which is the natural habitat for objects that died doing their jobs. The seller bragged that each bulb tells a story, which is technically correct because every bulb in the box clearly experienced trauma. Rarely has lighting been so emotionally layered. 44. A man listed a functional pool ladder, though one side was missing entirely, giving it the structural reliability of wet spaghetti. He spun this as aerodynamic asymmetry, which is a bold reinterpretation of broken. He wrote that the ladder still offers a journey upward, implying that reaching the top was more a philosophical achievement than a physical one. Someone bought it for a backyard art installation, proving that sculpture often begins where utility dies. The seller warned that the ladder may wobble, a phrase that undersells the experience of climbing what is essentially a metal suggestion. 45. A woman listed a gourmet fruit sampler, which included 3 apples, 1 orange, and a banana she labeled as decorative only, though she refused to explain what horrors had happened to it. She arranged the fruit in a wicker basket and called it curated produce, a phrase that would cause farmers everywhere to scream into a field. Someone bought it as a gift because they believed presentation matters, ignoring that the banana looked like it had survived a fall from orbit. The seller insisted the fruit was bursting with personality, demonstrating that nothing sells like confidence applied to perishables. 46. A seller attempted to move an antique laptop, which was just a disconnected keyboard taped to a wooden board. They claimed it evokes the spirit of early computing, which it certainly did, specifically the part where nothing worked. The tape was fraying in ways that suggested gravity had been doing battle for months. Someone bought it as a prank gift, which is the perfect destiny for an object that never took itself seriously. The seller warned it was not compatible with modern systems, a line that might be the understatement of the century. 47. Someone listed a fully functional home sauna, which was actually a cardboard refrigerator box with a space heater inside. They cut a head hole in the top so users could experience open-air wellness, though what they would actually experience is mild carbon monoxide concerns. The seller claimed the setup offered detoxification through courage, which is the most honest description they provided. Someone bought it because real saunas are expensive, and apparently so is common sense. The listing ended with limit sessions to 2 minutes, which is proof the seller at least cared about survival optics. 48. A man attempted to sell custom snow, which was just shredded printer paper stored in sandwich bags. He described it as everlasting winter ambiance, ignoring that it looked like the aftermath of a frustrated office worker. Someone bought it for a Christmas display because they were on a budget and willing to ignore accuracy. The seller bragged that his snow was eco-friendly, which is delightful considering it was literally trash. The best part, he warned buyers not to let it near heat because nothing says holiday magic like flammable seasonal decor. 49. A woman listed a motivational sculpture, which was simply a broken chair leg glued onto a rock. She explained the piece symbolizes perseverance, possibly because both objects had survived situations they were clearly not designed for. Someone bought it for their office, which is a terrifying glimpse into the American workplace. The seller insisted the sculpture inspires resilience, which is true, since anyone looking at it would immediately feel grateful they weren't held together by glue. 50. A seller offered a pre-loved musical instrument, which turned out to be a recorder with teeth marks deep enough to qualify as dental records. They described the marks as expressive wear, as if the previous owner had been performing avant-garde jazz with their molars. Someone bought it because they needed a prop for a school play, ensuring that whatever germs were on that recorder would get their own audience. The seller warned it may require cleaning, proving once again that some statements are too gentle for the horrors they represent. 51. Finally, someone listed a lightly used jar of silence, which was literally an empty mason jar with the lid screwed on tight. The seller claimed it contained the pure quiet of a moment no one appreciated at the time, instantly becoming the Shakespeare of nonsense. They priced it at $40, arguing that silence is rare these days, which, depressingly, is true. Someone bought it, of course they did, because they believed it would balance the sound energy in their home, meaning the final and dumbest sale on this entire list is literally nothing. And honestly, if selling the Absence of noise for profit isn't the perfect symbol of online stupidity, ambition, and American consumer culture merging into a single punchline. I don't know what is. Well, that was a guided tour through America's finest trash decisions. Pick the dumbest one in the comments, because clearly the chaos isn't stopping, and neither are we. Like and subscribe.